Welcome to episode 5 of Unexceptional Moms. I am Ellen Stumbo.
And I'm Erin Lorraine. And today we're talking about Down syndrome. We are going to be sharing with you what Down syndrome is, and then we're going to talk about the physical characteristics of Down syndrome. We're going to share with you some myths and stereotypes, and then also the joys of Down syndrome.
Yes, and our freebie for today is 31 facts on Down syndrome. So if you go to ellenstumble.com/episode 5, the number 5, you'll be able to download that. So let's get started. What's Down syndrome?
What is Down syndrome? And I think the most basic answer to that is it's an extra 21st chromosome. Hence the trisomy 21, 3 copies of 21.
Right. And there are 3 types of Down syndrome. There's the most common one, which is non-disjunction Down syndrome, which is what my daughter has.
And mine.
There's mosaic Down syndrome, where some cells have the extra chromosome and some cells are typical. So they do not have the extra chromosome. And it's very varied. So you can have someone with a lot of cells with the extra chromosome or just a few. And then there's translocation Down syndrome. And actually, that's the one where there are no 3 copies of the 21st chromosome. But what happens is that one of the 21st chromosomes kind of breaks, and that little piece that breaks off kind of attaches itself to another chromosome. And that's how you end up with translocation. So that's kind of like the nitty-gritty of Down syndrome explained really quickly. It's not an illness, it's not contagious, it's just a genetic condition.
Exactly. I explain when I teach the kids in Anya's class about Down syndrome, I tell them that it's like a recipe. Genetics is like a recipe, and it gives the pieces of who you are. And this says that you have brown eyes, and this says that you have blonde hair, and that hers with that extra chromosome, that extra part of the recipe says that she has some different things, which is the physical characteristics of Down syndrome.
Right. And, I like to think of it as creamer, since you're talking about recipes. You know how when you have coffee and you add creamer and it just kind of, swirls into your all of it? That's kind of what the 21st chromosome does, that it does kind of wash over. At least I think of it that way, which is just my way of understanding it. So that's it. Nitty-gritty. So physical characteristics. I love the physical characteristics.
I do too. I know. So I guess the one I think most people notice is those almond-shaped eyes.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
I know, they're amazing. Amazing.
Yes. Which I've always said that's the telltale of Down syndrome.
Yes.
The eyes.
Yes.
There's that. A lot of people with Down syndrome, they have a very, very small bridge of the nose, which is the little bone kind of between our eyes. So it's very small. My daughter's, it's very hard to see. And actually, when I was pregnant, that was one of the markers that we saw, that they couldn't find a bridge of the nose, which is a marker for Down syndrome.
But we should also note that the characteristics, some people have lots of them and some people don't have some. And so not every person with Down syndrome is going to have every single characteristic. Like one of them is a gap between their big toe and then their second toe.
Yes.
Not everyone has a big gap between those toes, but that is a characteristic of Down syndrome.
Correct. Which, for example, and I would say that my daughter has a lot of the physical characteristics of Down syndrome. I mean, she's a pretty typical child with Down syndrome, whereas your daughter is not.
Not so much. Not so much. And part of that, I would say, is body type. So people with Down syndrome tend to be shorter, stockier, thicker neck, things of that sort. Anya is long and lean.
Yes.
I would not say she's tall by any means. She's still very little for her age, but she's long and lean, and that is her genetics. I don't know what her parents look like because she's adopted, but I would bet that they're long and lean.
Right. Except what are you saying about my child then, Erin? Because she's not long and lean. She's short and stocky and well built.
We laugh when the two are together because they're just so opposite. And you're always like, she's so skinny.
Yes. which to me is shocking because we have the opposite. And my daughter is very self-conscious about her body shape, which, a lot of people wouldn't realize, are people with Down syndrome aware? My daughter is very aware. So it's something that she thinks about. And as a girl, that's a big deal. So we try to use positive language so she doesn't feel bad about it, because I've seen her, and I think I shared that with you, that one time she was trying to suck in her belly, laying on the floor. So,
and people with Down syndrome, as another characteristic, do struggle with their weight. Often.
They do. And a lot of times, it could be because of thyroid issues, because they're more susceptible, which some people think that there's a connection with that and celiac, and the gut, which sometimes happens more with people with Down syndrome. Your daughter has celiac.
Anya has celiac disease.
And my daughter has a severe sensitivity to gluten. And our doctor suspects that if we had not caught it, eventually it could have become celiac. So you have
Anya does not have a thyroid problem.
Correct.
But a lot of people with Down syndrome do.
Yes. But part of the body, as we talk about the stereotypes, is the low muscle tone, which that is a huge issue for people with Down syndrome, because I would say all people with Down syndrome have some level of low muscle tone. And then you got Anya. And then you have Anya. Bumpy. Well, but that's different, because that's part of the low muscle tone, that you are almost double jointed. They can bend in all sorts of ways, which Nicole can do that too. But that's like, when I think about the stomach muscles, like for Nicole, because of low muscle tone, that's going to affect, her muscle tone. Running, speech, because we have, I can remember, it's something like 50 muscles between the mouth and the tongue and everything. Don't quote me on that, but we have a lot of muscles just to make up the tongue and the mouth. So speech, that's why speech is affected. It's because of low muscle tone.
Exactly.
For a lot of kids, they take them longer to sit up, to pull up, to walk, running. That's all part of low muscle tone. Another physical characteristic, the hand.
Oh, the hand.
Yep. A lot of people with Down syndrome have the transfer palmar crease. They call it the simian crease, but I don't like that. Like, my daughter doesn't have that.
Neither does Anya.
It's just one line across instead of the 3 lines that most people have. And I remember when Nicole was born, that was one of the few physical characteristics that we had. And I remember my husband, Andy, grabbed her hand to look at it. And he came back and he said, I don't think she has Down syndrome because she doesn't have just the one line. So that's one of the few things my daughter doesn't have.
Right.
Crooked little finger, the pinky finger, that can be part of it. And my daughter has that. Other physical characteristics, there's the little specks in the eyes that are called, Erin, do you remember?
The brush field spots.
That's right. That's what they're called. Which does look like little specks around someone's eyes. Now, I do have a blog post about that, and I have pictures. So if you go to the post where this is, which is ellenstumble.com/episode 5, I will have a link to a post that talks about the physical characteristics of Down syndrome. Anything else that you can think about? I can't
think of any others.
If there's more, maybe we'll come back to those. So that's it for physical characteristics. So what about myths and stereotypes? So few.
Well, I think the big one that we hear all the time is they're always so happy.
So happy.
All the time. And they're not. They have the same range of emotions that everyone else does. And let me tell you, if you think people with Down syndrome are always happy, come spend some time at my house.
That's what I always say, to just come and hang out with us for a little while. Which is interesting because when Nicole was born, we had people, I think they were trying to encourage us, like, it's okay, it's going to be okay, saying, well, at least she'll always be happy. And I remember not feeling encouraged about it because I felt like, wait a second, I'm not going to be able to relate to my child because I'm not always happy. Sometimes I'm sad and sometimes I'm frustrated, and I want a child that will experience the same emotions that I do. And the good news is that people with Down syndrome are fully human and they experience all emotions.
Yes.
So along with that, it's that they're always so loving. They are so loving.
Well, and look, that goes both ways. They're not always loving. Your daughter actually is very reserved.
She's very reserved. She's shy. And she's very rude. I mean, to us, she's super rude. I pick her up at school, and you can ask her teacher. I pick her up, and she goes, "Oh, not you, Mom. I want Dad. Go away." And it's so clear. That's the speech that's super clear. And that's
of course, that's the speech.
You know, or I'll come and I'll hug her and give her a kiss, and she'll be like, "Oh, yuck, go away." So, I mean, that's not very loving.
Okay, but on the flip side, Anya is a hugger, and a lot of people with Down syndrome are. And the flip side of that is I have to teach Anya that it's not okay to go hug strange men, right? You can't just go hug people. So we're really working on, you can give them fives, you can give them fist bumps, and she's doing great with it. But we were at church last week, and she walked up to a man that was holding the door open, and she said, "Hug." And the man looked at me and said, "Is that okay?" And I said, "No one ever asked me if that's okay. Thank you so much for asking me." And I said to Anya, "How about a high five?" And she was thrilled. She gave him a high five, and in she went. And I just again said, "Thank you so much." She needs to know she can't go hugging strange men everywhere.
Right.
So that there are a lot of kids with Down syndrome who are very loving. And that cannot always be a great thing too.
Right. And I would say that my daughter is not one to go and hug a stranger, but she's one that will go and hug other people. Now, and I think part of the stereotype is because I would say that naturally my daughter is very loving and she loves big and, you know, no strings attached. It's that unconditional love. And I mean, she'll get in the car and we'll talk about her teacher and she'll say, "Miss Nelson, I love her. She's the best." And I know she truly does love her teacher. Yeah. But at the same way, she's going to tell you, you know, "Mom, go away." So again, that's the full emotions, right? Fully human, all emotions. Another stereotype is that they're angels sent from above to be amongst us.
Again, come spend a day in my house with the little girl who got in trouble on the bus last week for spitting at people and sticking her tongue out at them.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So no, it's not. They're not angels. And you know what? I'm glad that I get to parent a human and not an angel. In all honesty. Yes.
Okay, so along with this, I'm going to throw in that this is a stereotype technically. However, I have found it to be very true. They are incredibly, incredibly stubborn. So there is nothing angel-like when just the most stubborn human being I've ever met in my life.
Oh, so is my daughter. Just today. With taking a shower or a bath, which we were trying to include our children for the podcast today, and we realized it was not going to work. But, oh man, it's tears going in, tears going out, tears because the shower didn't work exactly the way she wanted to, and she wasn't the first. I mean, stubborn, and it makes for a frustrated mom sometimes and dad.
Yeah. So this bus incident, it involved a lot of kids on the bus, but all the other kids stopped, and she has not stopped.
Oh no,
will not stop. Yeah. So we're working on that now.
I do remember her sticking out her tongue, which again, that's not very loving. That's rude.
It is rude. It's hilarious though. But you know what the problem is that kids respond to it. They give her attention for it. They laugh or even if they get upset, it's all attention and she loves that. And so if she's going to get attention for it, she's going to keep doing it at the end.
Yeah. And my daughter can do that too. If she gets laughter attention, she's going to do it again.
Yeah.
Even though she's naughty. So as parents, we try very hard. Sometimes my husband and I kind of look at each other like, I'm trying really hard not to laugh right now.
Ignore, yeah.
I want to laugh, but if I do, she's going to do it again. So the other stereotype, which is not just for Down syndrome, it's just in general for special needs parents, that people say, God gives special children to special parents. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're so special. We're not. I think because we know ourselves, so we know who we are, well, there's nothing special about us, right? Yeah. And we don't have more patience, love, or divine insight compared to anybody else. And I think in the case for Down syndrome, and I like to point that out, is that most women with a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome choose termination. Mm-hmm. So that right there dismantles that myth, because there's absolutely nothing special. We're all scared at first when we don't know what we don't know. And I know that you adopted, so you went in knowing that you were going to adopt a child with Down syndrome. But for me, having been surprised when I was pregnant that my child most likely was going to have Down syndrome, there's a lot of fears and a lot of questioning. And that's when you recognize there is nothing special about me, because the fears and the questions I had are the same as any other parent.
And I would relate this again to my surprise diagnosis, which was Oksana's mental illness.
Right.
And people will say, I don't know how you do it. I could never do it. Well, neither could I, quite frankly. I mean, if you had asked me 3 years ago, could you parent a child with a severe mental illness? I'd say, absolutely not. So you just do what you have to do. And
I would say that personally, I feel sometimes that comments like that isolate us a little bit more. And we kind of talked about isolation in the last episode, but I think when somebody says, I could never do what you're doing, I feel like that kind of separates us, instead of for other people to recognize, if I could never do it, chances are they're really struggling. And what can I do to come alongside that friend? That we're not holier, we're not more special, we're struggling. And if they think that they would be struggling really bad, chances are we are.
And that's why it's important for us to be honest with people.
Right.
And to let them into our lives.
Right. Which, again, we covered all of that last episode. Yep. Okay. Another myth is that they cannot live independently.
Wrong. In fact, Anya's probably going to go be independent someday, and I will be the one devastated.
We talk about that all the time. And my daughter talks about how she's going to get married, and she's going to have her own house, and she's going to have a dog named Max.
Fabulous.
That it's all part of it. And she's going to have a job. Now, we'll see what happens. But I think especially nowadays, with what we know about Down syndrome, we are seeing more and more adults with Down syndrome be independent.
Oh, yes.
And we're seeing more and more parents devastated that their children actually left the home. Yeah. Which happens.
That's hard for me to imagine right now. I've only had Anya for 4 years. So the thought of giving her up someday is so not even on my radar right now, because I've only had her for 4 years.
Oh, so. We don't want her to go. Which is funny, because I had those thoughts. The moment she came out of me, I actually thought, oh my goodness, is she going to live with us forever? Is she ever going to have a job? Is she ever going to get married? Things that I never considered when my first daughter was born, who's typical. But now I think I'm totally fine if she lives with us forever. That's not going to be a problem. And I think once you know and once you live it and it's your life, you realize it's not this horrible thing that you thought that it would be.
Right.
Another stereotype, and this one really bothers me, that people with Down syndrome are perpetual children.
No, when people with Down syndrome grow into their teen years and into adulthood, they are teens and adults like everyone else. Granted, there's an intellectual disability there, but this is something that is a reality for us as parents. Their bodies still grow like adults. They have sexual desires like adults. They want families and love and children, just like all the rest of us do, because they are adults.
Right. And they have had adult relationships. And as you know, actually, when I go and speak at churches, when I talk about disability etiquette, I do use the example of a 30-year-old woman with Down syndrome, compared to, let's say, a 9-year-old, because I hear people say, well, they're really like a 9-year-old developmentally. And I get what people are saying.
Right. Of course, there is an intellectual disability.
Right. However, a 30-year-old woman with Down syndrome has had to go through puberty, has had to go through middle school, through high school, has had to figure out, where am I going to live? Where a 9-year-old has not had to do that. And a 30-year-old woman with Down syndrome has had to figure out where they're going to have a job and where their income and their sustainability is coming from, which a 9-year-old doesn't have to worry about that. It's all the adult experiences that they have had because they are adults.
And so along with that, we shouldn't speak to them like they're 9-year-olds.
Right. Which I love that there is a little, I don't know, it's a video, and it's actually from England, where they have adults with Down syndrome. And that's one of the questions. that they ask them, and I'm going to try to find it and link to it on the blog post, where they ask, what about when people talk to you like children, and they all the adults respond how frustrating it is, how condescending it is, One of the ladies even mentions, you even get the head tilt, like, hello, darling. Which,
see if you can get the one with the captions underneath, because they are a little hard to understand with the accent.
Right, and I will do that. So that's something I'm going to have on the post. Okay, another one. Oh, that people with Down syndrome, because they have an intellectual disability, they're not smart.
Wrong.
So wrong.
Wrong. Anya is very smart, and that might not mean she reads at a 3rd grade level, but that girl can figure things out. Keeping Anya out of things is almost impossible because she is so smart. She can figure everything out. I always say that she is a genius, but if only she would use her genius status for good and not evil.
Yes. Right. It is true. And that's how I feel with Nicole. If she wants something, she will do it. And I will tell you, the whole idea of angels, my daughter is a sinful little human being, and she does lie and blame her sisters for things that she has done, which she gets in trouble. But she can be very creative trying to figure things out, even when we've said no, because she's so smart. And I think about conversations that we have in front of her that even I have thought, I don't think she understands. She doesn't know what we're talking about. And the way she responds, because she's upset maybe about a certain conversation, oh, she is so smart. She knows exactly what we're talking about, what the discussion is about. So just because there's an intellectual disability, it does not mean that they're not smart. They are. Another stereotype is that kids with Down syndrome, they're a burden to their families and to the siblings.
It says the 2 moms who are here going, someday she's going to leave me.
I know, exactly. If she was a burden, why would we why would we want to keep them with us forever? No, I mean, I think that's a myth. And I think for me personally, when my daughter was first born, maybe I wrestled with some of those feelings. However, it is so different. And even my typical daughter, even Ellie, will say that she is going to take care of her sister. And I tell her, you don't have to. She's like, Mom, but why would I not want Nicole to be a part of my life? So for the whole family.
I can't say my boys are in the same place.
You have boys. But you know what? The last time we were home with you, I asked your boys about what's going to happen. And Clayton said that he's going to take care of Anya.
I think he would.
Yeah.
Evan is still, he and Anya are
very much siblings.
Very much siblings. Wrestling and teasing each other and nitpicking at each other. I mean, they adore. Anya thinks the world revolves around Evan and Clayton both, Clayton has taken on more of, he's 17 now. So he's taken on more of a caregiver role with her. And so she sees him as that. So I can see that.
Yeah, because I remember having that conversation. I don't know if you remember, but he said he thought Oksana would be difficult. Which you agree. Yes. Yeah. It will be harder. Okay. So those are some of the things, but what are the joys? Because there's so many joys about parenting kids with Down syndrome.
There really is. There really is.
And I think for both of us, it comes down to our kids.
Well, of course it does.
I mean, I cannot imagine my life without Nicole. I can't. Because all the good and the beautiful and the joy and the love, everything that she has brought into our lives, I can't imagine not having that. And I think it is specific to Down syndrome. And I hear a lot of people saying, Down syndrome does not define, my child. And, it doesn't. She's her own person. But Down syndrome is a really important part of who she is. And it is part of her identity. And it's part of her that I love.
Absolutely.
Those things that she brings into her family, into her life, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I agree completely. And of course, again, I chose Down syndrome in a sense. Well, I did. I mean, we specifically went looking for a child with Down syndrome. But I can't imagine life without her. Like, what was it? I was so bored before Anya came into my life. I'm convinced I was too bored. And that's why God gave us Anya.
Yeah. And, and I think I was too selfish and I was too stuck up in my own little world. And I had a really hard time looking outside of myself. And I really thought that caring about people had to do with a calling from God and not loving people just because we were meant to love people. And I think those lessons that I have learned because of my daughter, those have enriched our lives, and they have enriched our church, and they have enriched our relationships. And and we've talked about this before, even the friendships that have come from that. You and I would have never met if it wasn't for our kids with disabilities.
Right. And that's what I was going to say, is so much of this just applies to disability in general. And another thing, a joy, and it does apply to disability in general, is what we've seen in yours is a biological child, but what we've seen in their siblings because of having a sibling with a disability. It's a joy. It's not that it hasn't been hard. That is not the case at all.
Right.
It's a joy to watch them grow into young men and young women who are changed because of their siblings' disability.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at my daughter, my typical daughter, and I think she is one of the most amazing human beings I know. And part of it is the influence that her sisters with disabilities have had on her.
Definitely.
And she's more compassionate, and she's more caring, and she just loves and accepts people for who they are. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that for my daughter, disability is, her normal. It's her normal. Because she was too. She had a sister with Down syndrome. So those are the joys. And I know that we could just talk about the joys. And I think most special needs parents could talk about the joys that they've had because of their kids, not just because of Down syndrome. But there's a show that we're going to recommend, and it's called
Born This Way.
Born This Way. And I have not watched the second season yet. I know.
It's on A&E. We should mention that.
Yes.
It is on A&E. And it is it's a reality TV show.
It is.
That follows a group of adults with Down syndrome and looks at the joys and the challenges of being an adult with Down syndrome, but also includes their parents as well. And the show is just phenomenal. But I really adore those parents and learning from them and watching how they raise these young men and women. It's a fabulous show, and it did win an Emmy.
They did, which is really exciting. Yes. And I was talking to Erin, and we might have Sean join us for one of the podcasts with his mom. So if we can get that, we'll keep everybody posted on that. And I will link to the show on the blog post so people can go and link to that and watch it.
You will not be disappointed.
All the things that we talked about, that our kids have to go through, like independence and living on their own and having a job. And I mean, those are all things that they show real people, real adults with Down syndrome, how to go through those, and how the parents also learn to let go. And, I identify with the hard time that some of the parents have to let go and allow them to be independent, because I think when you parent kids with disabilities, I mean, you have this fierce love, and it's like this fire in your belly to protect them and to do anything you can. It's hard to let go.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's going to be hard for me to let go.
Yeah. I can from someone though who's letting her typical child go in a year to college, it's challenging no matter what.
It is.
It's just all the more.
Yes. So with that, I will say, I'm going to remind people that we have a freebie for you. It is 31 facts about Down syndrome. So you can just go click on the bright orange button, and it's going to get, it's a PDF. It'll go straight into your inbox, and you're going to have that. So what did we talk about today then? Quick recap.
Down syndrome. What Down syndrome is, the extra 21st chromosome, the physical characteristics of Down syndrome, which you're going to post to the blog, correct?
Yes.
It has all the physical characteristics, myths about Down syndrome, and the joys of Down syndrome.
Yes. And born this way. So,
and born this way.
And born this way. So now next week, we're going to be covering a topic that Amy asked us to cover, who is someone that has been listening to the podcast. And it is about when people are unkind, what to do, which Erin and I talked about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about education, or how you kind of educate people. So if you have been on my page, Ellen Simple Writer on Facebook, we'll probably be asking you, how do you respond in ways that educate people and they don't just push them away?
Yeah.
So
yes, we'd love to share your responses. And then again, please send us suggestions for podcasts, because we're enjoying suggestions and pondering what we can do with them related to our own experiences. So send us suggestions.
Yes, please. And so as always, I will invite you guys to subscribe and leave us a review and share this with your friends. So I will say until next week, we'll see you.
Bye.